Assalamu alaikum. Ismi Manoj.
Ismi Aparna.
Mehrban bikun fi al-Ardun. Welcome to Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. Hello, good morning. Day 1 of our trip. Officially, it's actually day 2. The first day was spent getting to Amman from India. It was a very forgettable day. There's no direct flights to Amman. We have to hop through Saudi Arabia. That wasn't the problem. The problem was when we got into Amman, the people there did not know that Indians are eligible for visa on arrival. That's fairly new. Only a year ago they started the visa on arrival, and the authorities did not know about it, and they made us sit for 3 hours while they checked papers, and it just went on forever. And after 3 hours, after a lot of arguing and heated discussions, they finally let us in. Anyway, bygones be bygones. Let's assume yesterday never happened. So today is officially the day 1 in Jordan. History of Jordan goes back several millennia. Jordan historically belongs to a region called Levant. Levant is a region on the eastern Mediterranean Sea that consists of present-day Israel, Palestine, Jordan, Syria and Lebanon. Let me start at 330 BC. That's when one Alexander of Macedon started his world conquest. He started a little bit west of here from Greece, swept through Anatolia and Turkey, Asia Minor, and he conquered Lebanon. He went on to conquer Persia, and he was stopped in Punjab by Porus. After Alexander, the whole area was taken over by his generals. The generals in Levant built 10 cities called the Decapolis. 7 of those 10 cities are in Jordan. The most famous of that is this, Jerash. In 106 AD, Romans came here and conquered the entire region and gave the whole place the distinctive Roman look. Jerash is the largest of the Decapolis. Baba Ganush for breakfast. So how is it?
Very tasty. I was looking forward to this. So, enjoying it.
Next up, Ajloun Castle. It started off as a Christian monastery during the Byzantine era, 4th century AD. In the 11th century, Christians from the west launched the first crusade and conquered most of Levant. 50 years later, Salahuddin helped recapture most of it back for the Muslims during the second crusade. To hold on to this victory, one of Salahuddin's generals built this castle in 1184. The castle overlooks the important trade route to Damascus. And that is lemon mint tea.
Lemon mint juice.
Lemon mint juice. So how is it?
Very tasty. Yeah, perfect for the hot weather.
This is Gadara near the city of Umquais. In comedy, there are 3 kinds of satire. One is called Horatian, named after Horace. One is called Juvenalian, named after Juvenal. The third one, which is the only indirect satire, is the Menippean satire. It's named after Menippus, Menippus of Gadara. He lived right here in the city. This is the Western Theatre of Gadara, and it offers a fantastic view from the seats. Gadara, by the way, is another of the Decapolis that the Greeks built in Levant. I have rented a car and we are driving around in Jordan, an automatic car, a Nissan Sunny, a nice car, and a nice rental car company. I will leave their name in the description. And the roads are fantastic, extremely scenic, very easy to drive. Everybody follows traffic regulations, very light traffic everywhere. This is Pella, another Decapolis, the smallest of the ones that we're visiting today. This is what the Jordanians are watching on TV. After this, I understand why they gave us such a tough time in the immigration. I think now we are even. And Aparna says this is Balika Vadu, whatever that means. Good morning. This is day 2 of our trip. I am in the balcony of our hotel in Jerash. And, you can see the view from the balcony. That's the Jerash ruins. Yes, it's a nice hotel. It is actually a flat turned into a room. This is the kitchen. It has all the amenities. That is the bedroom. Nice big room. Only negative is the toilet. It's very small and gets flooded when you have a shower. The place is very cheap. It's only about $22 a night. We drove to the northernmost point of our trip to the village of al-Jimal on the Syrian border. Near the village are the ruins of a Nabatean town whose original name has been lost to history. Nabateans came from the Arabian Peninsula and dominated the Levant region in the short window between the Greeks and the Romans, from about 3rd century BC to 106 AD when Rome conquered the entire region. When the Roman Empire split, this became part of the Eastern Byzantine Empire and grew into an important trading post. The site contains ruins of several Byzantine churches. The town was destroyed around 750 AD by an earthquake and never recovered its former glory. After the Romans came the Arabs. Their rise started in the early 7th century. The first caliphate was the Rashidun Caliphate, and Umayyads of Damascus replaced them in 661 AD. Umayyads built a series of forts in Jordan to defend their border with Arabia. The forts are collectively known as the desert castles. The first one we visited was Qasr al-Halabat, and it started off as a Roman fort in 3rd century AD during the reign of Emperor Karak, and later became a Byzantine monastery. Umayyads expanded it and rebuilt most of it in the late 7th century. Since this used to be a Byzantine monastery, there are several Byzantine era mosaics here. About 5 minutes drive from the fort is a Hammam As-Sara, which used to be a part of the larger fort complex in its heydays. Next up, Qasr Azraq. Unlike other desert castles, this one is built using basalt and hence has its characteristic black color. Desert castles are usually pale yellow. The fort has its usual layers of history, an old Nabatean structure forming the foundation of a Roman fort which was later expanded by the Umayyads. In this case, the history goes on. Most of what you see today is from the 13th century, built by the Ayyubids. Salahuddin founded that dynasty in the late 12th century. Ottomans occupied this in the 18th century, and much later, T.E. Lawrence, also known as Lawrence of Arabia, based his headquarters here during the Arab Revolt. More about him towards the end of this episode. Most striking feature of this fort are the numerous Roman-era arches. They have been standing here for close to 2 millennia. This is Qusair Amra. Qusair means little fort. This is the only desert castle that is also an UNESCO World Heritage Site. The reason for it are the wonderful frescoes on the inside. Built between 723 and 743 AD by the future Caliph Walid II, this is one of the earliest hammams in the Islamic world. If you are wondering what these human and animal figures, not to mention a naked woman, are doing inside an Islamic structure, well, the strict rule of not depicting humans or animals was not yet invented. Arabs had barely taken over from the Romans, and the Romans had ruled this region for half a millennia, and old habits die hard. The frescoes represent scenes from daily life, hunting scenes, and some important kings of that era. The last desert castle that we visited, Qasr Kharana, is also the most mysterious. We don't know if Umayyads built it, although it is popularly attributed to them. We don't know when it was built. We don't even know what it is. It looks like a fort on the outside and a caravanserai on the inside, but it is likely neither. This building is too small and has practically no water supply or storage to be of any use. On top of that, it is not close to any old trade or caravan routes. The whole day was quite windy, as you can see from this footage. That's why the whole day is being voiced over. The on-site voice recording was abysmal. We did visit one more Qasr al-Abd, which isn't part of the desert castles. That one is not located in the desert, it's located west of Amman in the verdant Jordan Valley. It's not a fort, it's a private residence. It wasn't built by the Umayyads. It was built in 187 BC by Tobiads, a notable Jewish family of that era. The architecture is quite distinct. It is one of the very few examples of pre-Roman construction in Jordan. Very little surveys from this era elsewhere other than the resilient pillars. It wasn't easy to get to. The roads were very narrow with a lot of blind curves. For our dinner in Amman, we are at a high-end restaurant. That's the bread basket. Hummus, that's rice. Yeah, and that is matabal, soups. So how was it?
Food was very tasty, actually, quite delicious.
Good morning, welcome to day 3. We are in Amman right now, to be precise the Amman Citadel. The Amman citadel was founded in 1800 BC. That's when Jordan was divided into three Bronze Age kingdoms: Ammon, Edom, and Moab. They are mentioned in the Bible. The city of Amman gets its name from the kingdom of Ammon, and the citadel was their capital. And when the Greeks came, this became one of the Decapolis. This was called Philadelphia. And then the Romans came. They built the famous Roman theater. Then came the Byzantines. There are a lot of Byzantines mosaics in this region. Then came Umayyads, and Umayyads built one great palace right here. There are layers of history here. After Umayyads came the Abbasids, then the Fatimids, and of course the Ottomans. A 10 minutes walk downhill from the citadel brings you to two wonderful theatres. The larger one is a Roman theatre dating from the reign of Antonius Pius around 150 AD. Cut into the hillside with a seating capacity of over 6,000, the sight of it from the opposite hill is quite breathtaking. The smaller theatre is called the Odeon, and it could seat about 500 people. It was also built during the 2nd century AD. These theatres are occasionally used for modern day performances. We unfortunately didn't have time to attend any of them. The next three sites weren't worth visiting. The first was the badly maintained Nymphaeum. The second was Duke's Diwan, the nation's first post office. And the third was Darat al-Funun, a modern art museum with some mildly interesting Byzantine ruins. The only saving grace was this make-your-own perfume in the roadside shop. The history of Levant goes back a very long way. Jericho, right across the border in Palestine, dates back to 9000 BC. So Jericho is older to the pyramids than what pyramids are to us. Here on the Jordan side, there was a town called Ain Ghazal, about 7000, 8000 BC. The world's oldest statues was from Ain Ghazal, and that's located in this Jordan museum. The museum also houses the famous Dead Sea Scrolls, the world's oldest biblical manuscripts. This is supposed to be the best falafel place in all of Jordan. Yeah, this is the standard platter. They just get you this for everybody. That's falafel, that's hummus, that's baba ganoush with pita and salad, and hot chai. How is it?
Delicious. Very, very nice.
Yeah, it's definitely worth the visit. After lunch, we headed to the King Abdullah Mosque, completed in 1989. It was built by the late King Hussein for his grandfather. It's also known as the Blue Mosque thanks to its striking blue mosaics on the dome. It can seat up to 7,000 worshippers on the inside. We had just enough time to squeeze in the World Heritage Site of As-Salt, which wasn't there in our original plan. The name comes from the Byzantine word saltus, which means forest, and has nothing to do with the salt we had to taste. It became an important trading town under the Ottomans and has several historic Ottoman era buildings. We only had time to visit two, the Prophet Joshua Mosque and St. George Church. Good morning, day 4 from Jordan. We are at the baptism sites of Jesus. It's on the Jordan River, the only point where the locals are allowed to touch the Jordan River. And here is where archaeologists believe Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist. You can visit the site only via a tour, which leaves every half an hour and takes about 2 to 3 hours to complete. It is about 5 minutes drive followed by a 15 minutes walk. The site is mentioned in the famous Madaba map, which we will see later today. After the Israel-Jordan Peace Treaty of 1994, lots of archaeological digs were conducted in the area, and they found foundations of 5 5th century churches right next to each other, and since they were all right where the Jordan River would have been at that time, they concluded that is probably where the 5th century Christians thought the baptism site was. The river marks the boundary between Jordan and Israel, and you can get to within the width of the river to Israel. At this point, we were so close to Israel that our mobiles were picking up Israeli towers, and the songs you hear are from the baptism events happening across the border. We have finally reached the lowest point on earth. This is the Dead Sea. And right across the sea there is Israel. The water here is so salty that nothing grows here, that's why the name. And the buoyancy is so high that you cannot sink. So how is the water?
Yeah, very nice actually. Cold and lovely.
It's very salty.
Yes, very salty.
We are at the Dead Sea Panoramic Complex, which is located on a cliff with a fantastic view of the Dead Sea. And there is a very good restaurant here. Where Apana is standing is the sea level. And the Dead Sea down there is 450 meters below sea level. An hour northeast of Dead Sea is Mount Nebo. That's how far Moses got on his exodus from Egypt. It was here that he sighted the promised land for the first time and breathed his last. A 530 AD church marks the location. You can see the modern building sitting on top of the older foundation. The church has one of the best preserved mosaics in all of Jordan. A 15-minute drive from here is another church, 537 AD Church of Lot and Procopius, where you can enjoy the recently restored mosaics in complete solitude. Mosaics occupied us all afternoon as we spent the rest of the day at Madaba, the mosaic capital of the Byzantine Empire. Madaba's history goes back a long way. It was an hotly contested border city between Bronze Age kingdoms of Moab and Israel. But its importance grew during the Byzantine era between the 2nd and the 7th century AD, when the town went on a building spree, constructing several churches with vibrant mosaics. The crowning glory of all the mosaics is the famous Madaba map. Made in 560 AD, the map shows the important pilgrimage site in the Holy Land. Its accidental discovery in 1884 shocked the world of archaeology. Several biblical era sites were discovered using this map. The mosaics of Madaba are truly astonishing. We have never seen anything like that before. The only break from the mosaics was the century-old St. John the Baptist Church. The interesting bits of the church were the impressive front facade, a 3,000-year-old and still functional Bronze Age Moabite well, and a strenuous 120-step climb to the best view in all of Madaba. This is our hotel room in Madaba, pretty nice hotel, we'll recommend it. It's a 15-minute walk to the city center, not that bad. And that's the view from the room, and that's a toilet, pretty nice, very clean, and it has a separate shower area, that's always good. This one is a true lifesaver. Shenina means near more. The perfect drink to complement any heavy hummus, falafel, mutabal based meals. Good morning, welcome to day 5 of a Jordan trip. Today we are driving the famous the King's Highway. The King's Highway is an ancient trade route that connected Heliopolis in Egypt to Damascus and Euphrates Valley. It was used as far back as the Iron Age. We will be traveling a small portion of it between Madaba and Petra. As you can imagine, the route is chock-a-block with historic sites, and we will be visiting the most important ones today. At the palace of Herod the Great. This was fort built in 100 BC, and Herod the Great expanded it in 30 BC, and it was here that John the Baptist was beheaded. And in 70 AD, Rome conquered this place and kicked out the Jewish rebels and completely destroyed the fort. The place is extremely scenic, although hardly anything remains of the fort. As you can see, the winds were of biblical proportions today. The desert castle day was a gentle breeze in comparison. We were literally and figuratively blown away by the place. 2 hours from here is the town of ar-Rasas, which houses the UNESCO World Heritage Site of Mefa Fort. The fort is mentioned in the Old Testament and so existed as far back as the Bronze Age, although most of what is seen today dates from the Roman era. This was one of the Limes Arabica, a series of forts that Rome built to guard this part of their empire. The fort has ruins of several Byzantine-era churches. Sadly, all that remains are the haunting, resilient arches. There is one exception, that is the Church of St. Stephen's, dating from 785 AD. It houses some well-preserved mosaics, as good as, if not better than anything we saw in Madaba or Nebo. Coming up next is the most famous Crusader castle. Perched on a hilltop looking down on a valley, the setting is simply spectacular. That's Karak. We are at the restaurant overlooking the Karak castle and hummus, mutabal and pita, and that's Aparna. And there, that's the view, and that's the castle. Perfect. After the Arabs, the Umayyads and later the Abbasids took control of the Holy Land in the 8th century AD, a resentment started brewing in the Christian world, and a few centuries later, in 1096 AD, the First Crusade was launched to win back the Holy Land from the Saracens. A coalition of Christian nobles and knights managed to win the First Crusade thanks to the instability in the Arab world due to the decline of the Abbasids and the infighting among the Seljuks. The Crusaders started building castles to protect their new possessions, and Karak was the biggest of their creations. It was built in 1142 by the king of Jerusalem, and one Hanno de Chatillon inherited it in 1176. Hanno started attacking the Muslim caravans and pilgrims, which prompted Salahuddin to launch a lengthy siege in 1184. The castle eventually fell in 1188. 2 hours south of Karak is another Crusader masterpiece, Shobak. The fort was built in 1115 AD by Baldwin I, the first Count of Edessa and the second King of Jerusalem. The original name of the castle was Montreal. The castle was taken by Saladin forces in 1189, a year after Karak, after an epic 18-month siege. After the Ayyubids, the dynasty that Saladin founded, came the Mongol conquest, and then the Mamluks, who defeated the Mongols. Most of the structures here date from the Mamluk era. Although smaller than Karak, the perch of Shobak is no less dramatic and its ruins no less evocative. Good morning, day 6, and we are finally in Petra, the most important site in all of Jordan. Petra opens at 6 a.m. and that's when you have the best chance to beat the tour groups. Petra involves a lot of walking. A 15-minute walk brings you to the Sikh. These giant blocks that you pass by are the Nabatean gods. We are entering the famous Sikh, the narrow canyon that leads into the town of Petra. Sikh is in fact not a canyon or a gorge, it wasn't carved by a river. It was tectonic activity that created this gap between these rocks. On the side of the Sikh are these water channels. Nabateans used to collect water, rainwater runoff from these and then send them to reservoirs. The much anticipated end of the 20-minute walk through the Sikh is the classic view of Petra. This is Al Khazana, the treasury, the single most photographed monument in all of Jordan. This was most likely the mausoleum of the Nabatean king Aretas IV, built in the 1st century AD. Bedouins of the 19th century thought this was a treasury, and hence the name. Petra was a merchant town from at least the Bronze Age. Its zenith came during the reign of the Nabateans, an Arabian Bedouin tribe who settled here in the 3rd century BC. They became rich by controlling the trade between the east and the west. Rome conquered this place in 106 AD and added their characteristic Roman touch. Petra stopped being mentioned in the history records from about 7th century AD. The Bedouin tribes knew about the place at least since the 18th century and kept it as a well-guarded secret. In 1812, a Swiss explorer, Johann Ludwig Burckhardt, who knew enough Arabic and Islamic law to pass on as a Muslim, took on a pseudonym of Ibrahim and feigned that he wanted to make a sacrifice to Aaron. Bedouins thought one of these tombs was that of the Aaron, the brother of Moses. Burckhardt discovered this place and announced it to the Western world. A 40-minute hike from the heart of the old city of Petra, its grand temple, brings you to this best monument, the monastery. It is named so because it was used as a church during the Byzantine era. This is most likely a tomb carved in the 1st century AD. We left Petra around noon, having clocked 20,000 steps in about 6 hours. If you don't want to walk, you can take one of these donkeys. After lunch, we headed to the nearby site of Little Petra, which has more Nabatean tombs. Despite a couple of decent tombs, the place is quite underwhelming after visiting Petra. But we knew that coming in. We were here because Little Petra is where you have to park in order to visit the relatively unknown Al-Baida. We are now off to Al-Baida. It's one of the oldest sites in all of Middle East. And that's the guide, 16-year-old boy, who is leading us there. This is Al-Baida. This marks the transition from the hunter-gatherers to the settled farmers. This site was inhabited between 8500 BC and 5500 BC. What you see are one of the earliest architectural constructions by humanity. This is our room in Petra, microscopic. There's just a foot of space outside of the beds to walk around. The carpet is barely clean. The toilet is reasonably spacious and reasonably clean. And the plus points are this is bang at the city center, so everything is close by. The shopping is close by, laundry, supermarket, everything is right here. And the food at the restaurant below is pretty good. Good morning, day 7 in Jordan, and we are at Wadi Rum. In our history trip down the Jordan, there is one person who we have not yet encountered, and that's Lawrence of Arabia, and we will meet him here, of course not in person. The region of Levant and Arabia was part of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottomans and the British were on the opposite sides during the war. In order to weaken the enemy, Britain decided to egg the Arabs to revolt against the Turks, and T.E. Lawrence was a liaison man who helped in the process. Hussein bin Ali, Sharif of Mecca, started the revolt in 1916, ably assisted by Lawrence. A lesser known but probably more important assistance came from Gertrude Bell, the Queen of the Desert. She knew the Bedouin tribes very well and was fluent in most of the dialects and was able to provide crucial information which led to the success of the revolt. The Arabs used to station themselves here and attack and break the railway lines, and in one daring attempt, they attacked the port city of Aqaba from here. Turks weren't expecting an attack from the desert side, and that's exactly what the Arabs did. Wadi Rum Visitor Center is about half an hour drive from the main highway, and that turnoff is 2 hours from Petra. A 5 dinar entrance fee would let you drive a couple of kilometers after that up till the village. If you want to go any deeper, you need a guide and a transport, a camel or a 4-wheel drive. There are several options available. We found the 5-hour jeep drive to be optimal. That tour takes you to almost all of the important points, and since we had an 8 am start, we could be back with enough time for a quick visit to Aqaba. Of course, if you have a day to spare, you should overnight here in one of the several Bedouin camps available inside the park. The sunset here is truly magical. An hour drive from Wadi Rum brought us to Aqaba. The Aqaba fortress was built in the 1500s by the Egyptian Mamluks, mainly to serve as a caravanserai for their pilgrims performing Hajj. The fort was enhanced by the Ottomans about a century later, and they occupied it till the First World War. This was the fort that the Arabs captured during the revolt after the daring attack crossing the Wadi Rum desert. Last day we are eating at the hotel that we are staying, and this is the view from the restaurant. Among the new orders, this one is a Bedouin salad. It's a brinjal with some spicy sauce, and this one tastes exactly like Mexican salsa, and that is fatouche. That's falafel, and that's makluba. How is it?
Yeah, very tasty actually. Rice in after 9 days is yummy.
And your chatpatanas is back.
Yeah, and chatpatanas is back for sure, yes.
Yeah. Cooling our heels in the deep blue waters of the Red Sea was a wonderful way to end a memorable trip. From Al-Jimal in the north to Aqaba in the south, we covered the entire length of the country. And between Al-Baida and Aqaba, we had covered over 10,000 years of rich history. Jordan was truly amazing. After all this sightseeing, we have barely scratched the surface. The Jordanians were extremely welcoming, and the food was fantastic. It was a pleasure driving on these roads. The scenery was quite spectacular. Okay, the usual final words. So Aparna, what was the 3 best places that you saw?
I like Petra the best, and then second would be the tiles, the mosaics of from the Byzantine era, and lastly floating in the Dead Sea. It was a very memorable experience.
Your favorite experience?
Yeah, visiting the baptism site of Jesus Christ was a memorable experience.
Yeah, for me the locations would be same as yours. The experience would be eating motabal and hummus in Hashim's. I think that was the best. That food was just out of the world. Yeah, the bad experience, of course, was the immigration. Our tip for you guys would be to get, you guys, I mean people with Indian passport, is to get US visa. US gives 10 years visa. If you have US visitors visa, then you can walk in. There is no problem here. That would be our advice. Okay, that's it from Jordan. Until we say hi from some other part of the world, ma salama.
Bye bye.